I met my husband through work and we got married 3 years ago. We rented an apartment close to his parents' house and started living there. The first year or so went smoothly. We were both busy with our jobs, but since we didn't have any children yet, we'd grab dinner at a nearby pub when work ran late, or relax at home watching movies on our days off. We enjoyed our carefree life together, just the two of us. Living near my husband's parents was his idea. He's an only child and wanted to be close by to take care of his parents eventually. Though we intended to be close, our busy schedules meant we only saw them maybe twice a month at most. Usually, it was after a nudge from my mother-in-law suggesting it was time to show our faces, leading to dinner at their place. To be honest, visiting my in-laws was always a bit dreary for me. My husband and I came from very different backgrounds, which often put me at odds with my mother-in-law. I was raised in a laid-back environment by my parents, never pushed to study, and allowed to grow freely. I did graduate from a local college, but my student days were filled with hanging out with friends and working various part-time jobs. On the other hand, it seems my husband was raised quite strictly by his education-focused parents. Especially my mother-in-law, who epitomized the term a tiger mom, sending him to tutoring from a young age and constantly expecting him to attend a top university and land a prestigious job. As a result, my husband lived up to their expectations, attending the most competitive high school in the county, graduating from a well-known private university, and securing a job at a major corporation. He turned out to be the pride and joy of his parents. And as for the final piece of the puzzle, my mother-in-law apparently hoped for a stay-at-home wife to support her successful son from behind the scenes. However, the real-life wife, me, is more of a career woman, preferring to streamline household chores as much as possible. I made full use of convenient appliances and occasionally employed a cleaning service. Needless to say, my mother-in-law, who believes in traditional gender roles for household chores, was not impressed. When we visited to announce our engagement, mentioning my intention to continue working post-marriage elicited from her, "I wonder if you're really cut out to be the wife of an elite son?" And every time we visited after getting married, it was, "How long do you plan to keep working? When will you give me grandchildren?" It was incessant. Despite my mother-in-law's dislike, my father-in-law was surprisingly supportive of women working and would gently check his wife's attempts to control me, saying, "Let her be, she has her own way of living." Besides, since we rarely saw my mother-in-law, her remarks were easy enough to shrug off during those brief encounters, and we managed to maintain a cordial relationship with my in-laws. However, our circumstances took a drastic turn. A year into our marriage, my father-in-law passed away. He had been managing his chronic illness and was still enjoying golf, so his sudden death was unexpected. His condition worsened rapidly once he was hospitalized. In the weeks following his passing, there were many arrangements to handle, and my mother-in-law didn't have the bandwidth to critique me. But once the mourning period was over, she started to act out. First, she began pressuring me to quit my job. When I resisted, she disparaged my workplace, saying, "It's just a matter of time before your little company goes under. Why not quit and focus on household duties and starting a family?" Indeed, my workplace was a small, newly established company with a young CEO and a handful of employees. It couldn't compare to the corporation my husband worked for in terms of scale or reputation. But I took pride in my work, and her unsolicited opinions were frankly none of her business. Without my father-in-law's moderating presence, my mother-in-law felt free to say and do as she pleased. He was a kind and quiet man who spoke up when necessary, often reprimanding her when she went too far in her treatment of me. It seemed she had held back somewhat out of consideration for him, but with him gone, there was no one to curb her behavior. As for my husband, he's always been meek around his mother. He tried to mediate with, "Now, Mom, calm down. This is between us," but would shrink under her loud rebuttals, proving unreliable in the face of conflict. Still, I kept deflecting her pressures about work and children. As long as I didn't quit, it was a non-issue. The real problem arose when she suddenly proposed we live together. Initially, I thought she might be feeling lonely without my father-in-law. They had their differences but seemed to get along well enough, and I could understand her feeling isolated. I had braced myself for eventual cohabitation, considering my husband is an only child and, while my mother-in-law was still healthy, we couldn't leave her alone if her health declined. But her reasons for suggesting we move in together were nothing like I had imagined. "If I lived with you, I could take care of the household chores, couldn't I?" she said. I was puzzled why she would offer to do the chores, but apparently, she had seen my husband taking out the trash one morning and felt it was outrageous that her hardworking son was burdened with household tasks. But to me, the idea that taking out the trash was some burdensome chore was incomprehensible. After all, that was about the extent of the chores my husband did. I handled everything else on top of working, cooking, cleaning, laundry. It was tough, but as I mentioned before, I always tried to streamline the chores. The two of us could manage without my MIL's help. So, I ignored my MIL's complaints and made it clear to my husband that I wasn't ready to live together. The prospect of intensified meddling was obvious, and it was too soon to cohabitate, especially since she was still quite spry in her 60s. However, my husband's response was disheartening. At a time when I hoped he would stand by me, he didn't challenge his mother's assertion that I was pushing household chores onto him. Instead, he just nodded along as if he agreed with her. This infuriated me and left me deeply disappointed. Even the trash, which I prepared for him to simply take out, seemed to be a point of contention. Initially, my husband said he wanted to cherish our time together as a couple by living alone, but I began to suspect he actually wanted to live with his mother. My suspicions were confirmed one day when we invited her over for dinner at our apartment. Since my FAL's passing, it became more common for us to host her rather than visit her home. While I cooked, my husband would pick her up and, after the meal, drive her back home. One evening, as we were dropping her off, my husband muttered, "It would be easier if we all lived together, no need for all this driving." My MIL, seizing the moment, suggested, "Maybe next time I should bring a change of clothes so I can stay over?" They exchanged glances and chuckled together. I was horrified. My MIL, clearly aiming to move in, would surely never leave once she got her foot in the door. Despite her hints at wanting to stay after dinners, I made sure my husband always took her back home, refusing to compromise, but then, my MIL resorted to unbelievable tactics. One lazy Sunday afternoon, with both of us at home, the doorbell rang insistently. I was shocked to see my MIL standing alone at the door through the intercom, unannounced and apparently having taken a taxi, with an enormous amount of luggage in tow. She stood there, bags bulging, wrapped in a bundle that made her look like a cartoon character running away from home. I managed a laugh at her comical appearance but sensed this was no ordinary visit. Tentatively, I opened the door and asked, "What's all this about? What's with the get-up?" She blurted out, "Can't you see? I'm moving in. Moving in. Moving." I was utterly dumbfounded, but what my mother-in-law said next truly floored me. She declared, "From today, I'll be living here, so you need to move out." I knew my mother-in-law had her eye on our place for some time, but I never imagined she'd storm in unannounced like this. And her demand for me to leave so she could move in was utterly baffling. She casually dropped her bags in the hallway and made to take off her shoes, intent on making herself at home. That's when I grabbed her by the shoulder, "Hold on just a minute," and called my husband, who was lounging in the living room with his phone. He came out, phone still in hand, and I immediately sought his intervention. "Do something, please. Your mom's saying she's moving in today and that I should leave." My husband appeared momentarily shocked but then uttered the unbelievable, "Why not let her stay? She's brought all her stuff, we can't just turn her away, can we?" Feeling a chill, I asked him, "And what about me?" He hesitated, "Well, you could." And then fell silent. Here we go again. His default silence when things get tough. It was the usual scenario, with my MIL taking charge. She barged in, "A wife who dumps chores on my son isn't needed, right? Until he finds a wife willing to be a proper homemaker, I'll take care of the household chores," she insisted, pushing her agenda on my silently acquiescing husband. Essentially, it seemed my MIL wanted my husband to divorce me and find someone new. When you think about it, her demands were utterly self-centered, yet my husband remained silent with a confused look on his face. So, I asked him, "Are you really okay with me leaving?" He looked down, fidgeting. "Which is it? Do you want me to leave?" I asked, irritation in my voice. Then he said, avoiding eye contact, "Well, no, I mean, it would be difficult for me if you left, but Mom says you should go." Always Mom. I sighed deeply. Always Mom with him, always doing whatever his mother says, as if he has no will of his own. He's always been more concerned about pleasing her than standing by me, though I've tried to overlook it. I thought it must be hard on him too, caught between his mother and me, feeling the pressure of being an only child. But this time, I can't bear it any longer. He has no intention of protecting me. So, I have no doubts about what I need to do. I said to my husband, then, "I'm leaving." "Wait, are you really leaving?" He suddenly panicked. Then, grabbing my arm, he said, "Hold on, can't we talk about this more?" He must have been shocked that I was actually going to leave. But then my mother-in-law interjected, "There's no need to stop her. From today, I'll keep the place spotless and cook delicious meals every day," stepping between my husband and me, rendering him speechless again. Frustrated, I turned my back on both of them and started packing my bags. While I was packing, my mother-in-law couldn't resist saying, "You brought this on yourself. You were never a match for my elite son." She must have wanted to see me upset. But I continued packing without a care. I knew it was only a matter of time before they'd come begging. So, I left and took refuge at my parents' house for the time being. My parents were a mix of surprised and exasperated when they heard the story. "It's good you left that mama's boy," they said. "You're welcome to stay here as long as you like," they offered. I decided to lean on my parents for a while and commuted to work from their house. The distance between my parents' house and work was significant, but I had no desire to see my husband or mother-in-law again, nor any intention of returning to the apartment. I hadn't reached out to my husband since leaving, and there was no word from him either. I lived peacefully at my parents' house, thinking divorce was inevitable. Then, a few months later, I received a call from my mother-in-law. "Please, come back," she begged right away. I couldn't help but think, so it's come to this, but I responded, "What are you talking about? Weren't you the one who kicked me out?" She sounded desperate. "I'm sorry for what happened. Please, come back right now. We're going to be kicked out of the apartment." It's no wonder she was panicking. The rent for the apartment had been paid by me. The thing is, my husband had quit his job and become an NET. Despite my mother-in-law boasting about her son being an elite with a high education, he turned out to be a highly educated NET, not an elite. He left his job about half a year after my father-in-law passed away. Despite following the elite path his parents had hoped for and landing a job at a major corporation, he struggled to achieve results and had a hard time with office relationships, eventually burning out. He tried looking for another job and went to the job center, but nothing came of it. More accurately, he didn't seem to want to find anything new. My husband used the recession as an excuse, claiming, "No one's hiring anyway," and made no effort to find work. Sure, the economy might not be great, but job ads come in every week, and a quick internet search shows plenty of companies are hiring. So, I encouraged him, "Don't give up before you even try. Apply somewhere. With your skills, you'll find a job in no time." But he flatly refused. "The jobs advertised are all for small to medium enterprises. They're beneath me." His pride was misplaced. As a result, he remained unemployed. It wouldn't have been so bad if he helped with household chores, but true to his mother's son, he held the belief that men shouldn't do housework, only taking out the trash. Reluctantly, I managed all the housework while also working. Meanwhile, I continued to excel at my job, eventually getting promoted to manager. Being a manager in my 20s might be early, but it was a small company with many opportunities for those willing to work hard. With the promotion and a salary increase, I was supporting us, paying the rent while my mother-in-law unknowingly drove me out. She probably never imagined I was the one paying the rent. The apartment lease was in my husband's name, and since he became unemployed, I was transferring money into his account to cover rent. Once I was kicked out, naturally, I felt no obligation to continue paying, and the transfers stopped. Initially, there was enough money in the account to cover the rent, but eventually, funds ran out, prompting a call from the apartment owner. My husband had been pretending to go to work every day since my mother-in-law moved in, likely unable to admit to her or himself that he was unemployed. He would leave the house in a suit and spend his days at parks or libraries. Upon learning the truth, my mother-in-law frantically apologized, begging me to return. But as I continued to refuse, she eventually said, "Even if you don't come back, could you at least pay the rent?" At that point, I hung up, finding the conversation absurd. Despite their persistence, my father helped me get a lawyer, and I successfully divorced. Soon after, they were evicted from the apartment and returned to the deteriorating family home, which had been neglected for months, leading to leaks and infestations. With no savings left, my husband, no longer able to afford his pride, started working multiple part-time jobs. Now, he and my mother-in-law are scraping by in their old home. It seems he's finally set aside his pride, a change for the better. Divorcing was the right decision for both of us. As for me, I couldn't impose on my parents forever, so I rented an apartment near them and started living on my own. I'm truly grateful to my parents for their support when I left my home. Work is going well, and I'm considering moving to a larger apartment soon,